Well, family, these are challenging times. There's no easy way to start conversations like this because all of our hearts are raw and they're real, and we're feeling a lot of things, feeling a lot of the good memories, a lot of the challenging days. And I don't think that it's bad to feel both the good and the challenges. I remember, just reading the other day in Psalm 23 that the Lord is not only present with us along the green pastures and still waters where he restores our soul, but even when we're surrounded and it seems really dark and it seems really challenging, he's still there. His presence is still there, and he's still preparing a table before us in the presence of our enemies. So as family, we get the opportunity to come together, to be there for one another in the good days, but also on the challenging days where the heart is a little bit more raw. And I would say the second thing that I know for sure right now is that Grampa would absolutely rather be doing potluck, and he would be whispering to me, if I was sitting next to him going, hey, keep it short, keep it sweet, let's eat. And let's get to the fellowship part. So I will keep this short and I will keep it as sweet as possible, as I look back. And, the last few days as I've looked back, I'm thinking of all of the good memories that I possibly can, writing them down and journaling them from the earliest days that I can remember with Grampa all the way up until the last year or so. My earliest memories with Grandpa are at the house on the corner of North and Atwood Street there in Millington, and them playing cards around the table and us young ones literally crawling around and playing, going inside the living room with was it blue carpet or something, and fast forwarding a couple years, remembering up at the cabin. And I would always remember Grandpa sitting to the right of that, in that chair that had the deer glowing picture behind him, and Grandma in the kitchen cooking on the griddle with my mom or Aunt Terry or whoever happened to be there making Pop's pancakes in the morning. And usually it was the grandkids' job to go out and find the wild blueberries to mix inside the pancakes. And whether we were at the cabin or at home, wherever we happened to be, Grandpa and many of our parents had a very similar rule that we always had to spend the same amount of time with Grandpa that we did with Grandma, or vice versa. So if we went out on the dock fishing for an hour with Grandpa, then we were inside, we were learning to cross stitch or crochet or, whatever with Grandma, picking blueberries, whatever it happened to be. And I always appreciated that time. And I look back now in my 40s, and those are some of the sweetest memories of my life, having that connection time with both of my grandparents that we all love dearly. And some of us grew up going to St. Louis Campmeeting together, whether it was a day or a week or whatever it happened to be, and cramming inside that fifth wheel, going on camping trips with Grandma and Grandpa in those fifth wheel, or looking back on the many potlucks that we had. And it was always the inside joke with our family that we'd be sitting around and we'd look at our clock and go, man, it's been 2 hours. I'm hungry. When are we going to eat? And I don't know how long y'all have been sitting there before you watch this video, but it's probably getting a little bit closer. And to me, those family moments gathered together around the table, that's where it's at. That's where hearts are unlocked. That's where we laugh. That's where we have the conversations. That's where we wrap up, one meal and start playing solitaire or euchre, 20 minutes later out on the table. Some of those sweet memories are the ones that I think we're all holding on to, especially on days like today. Looking back on times, and in Grandpa's favorite place, of course, in the wood shop, whether it was making birdhouses or planing boards or whatever, that was Grandpa's probably favorite place on the planet besides the chair. But in that wood shop, that's where that guy was at home. And I remember, whether it was being 15 years old or, 43 years old, he was always playfully stingy. He would always play the hard to get game. If you wanted, a board that you would take down, well, I can't get rid of that board. And the reality is, we all knew at the end of the day, he was always going to give up that board, no matter how precious that black walnut was or that piece of cherry. He would always give it up for his favorite grandkids or his favorite kids, which we all know who that was. And as an adult, I look back on those memories and I look and I see both the good times and even some of the challenging times that to me can be almost as bittersweet as that terrible Folgers coffee that he absolutely loves. And in the days going forward, every time I hear one of those darn Folgers commercials, you know where we're all going to be thinking is about Grampa, who always hated Starbucks, which, that's a whole other conversation. But today, let's focus on the good. Let's focus on those beautiful memories that we were able to see one another growing, one another thriving, one another spending times laughing and enjoying life with Papa in the workshop. And I will say, for even Grampa, it's hard for me to realize sometimes that our parents and our grandparents, whether they are, 68 years old or 88 years old, they are still sons and daughters of God. And one of the things that I appreciate about my grandfather is that in the later years of his life, I saw him growing and adapting in new ways and becoming more tender and more kind toward his family. I saw him caring for Grandma, caring for his kids in these later years in ways that he wasn't able to earlier on. But as things began to progress within our family, I saw my grandfather's heart unlock and be able to love and serve in different ways, be able to cook meals that he never would have done 25 or 30 years ago, cooking meals and doing dishes and caring for the hearts of his family. I got to see my grandfather grow. And that to me was a reminder that even to this day, he is still a son of the Most High God. He's still a child before the Father. And so even though he may have been stingy and stubborn up until his last day, he is still a son. And so I would say to you and also to my grandfather that I'm proud of my grandfather for living these last years as a son. And I really feel like the Father looks at him where he is today and says, well done, good and faithful servant. None of us were perfect along the way. None of us walked the road, in the ideal fashion. We all made some mistakes. We were all stupid along the way. But I really feel like, especially in these last few years, my grandfather was faithful and his heart became kind in a new way. And so today I look back on the many memories that I have with you guys, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my nephews or great nephews or whatever the heck they're called. And I look back on those memories with Grandpa Eugene with very kind eyes. So before I leave, I just want to remind all of you, of course, you probably already know this, that you are his favorite and you always will be his favorite grandson or his favorite child. I love you guys and I'll see you soon.